The Tanker War Blueprint, Iran, Iraq, 1984 to 88. To understand the playbook, we go back to the stretch of years when tankers became targets and neutrality turned into a rumor. It starts in 1984, mid-Iran, Iraq War, when both sides decided oil lifelines were fair game. Missiles and mines didn't care whose flag flew at the stern. Liberia, Panama, Kuwait. Registries blurred. Crews learned that insurance didn't stop shrapnel. Ship owners changed flags like jerseys, hoping a different legal wrapper might keep a missile from recognizing them. It didn't. Attacks came in tight clusters. Exocets launched from aircraft, rockets from speedboats, mines planted after midnight. Captains began steaming dark, AIS off, lights masked, hoping invisibility beat accuracy. Meanwhile, in Gulf boardrooms, the math changed. A voyage that looked profitable on Monday bled on Tuesday when premiums spiked. Some masters refused sail orders. Some mates left at the next port. The Gulf's rhythm, load, depart, deliver, got a new drumbeat: hit, burn, drift. Kuwait went to Washington with a blunt request: protect our tankers. The workaround they landed on became a precedent: reflagging. Take Kuwaiti hulls, put US flags on their sterns, assign US Navy protection. Operation Earnest wasn't just convoys, it was a legal tightrope. The US wasn't at war with Iran or Iraq, but it was about to shepherd ships through a shooting gallery. The message said de-escalation. The hardware said otherwise. Destroyers, frigates, marines, helicopters, surveillance suites humming. Convoying took choreography. Gather tankers at staging points, file them through lanes, warships spaced like guardians in a grim procession. The escorts weren't just guns, they were eyes. Helicopters scanned wakes for mine shapes. Sailors leaned over with binoculars, searching for fishing buoys that didn't belong. Radios stayed clipped, voices terse, call signs rehearsed. The goal wasn't to defeat everything. It was to make the price of a successful attack higher than the benefit of trying. Then came the Bridgerton. July 1987, a reflagged supertanker leading a convoy struck a mine near Farsi Island. The blast tore steel open and forced a choice. If the escorts went ahead, they'd risk more mines unseen. So they tucked behind the tanker and followed her wake, warships hiding in the wounded ship's shadow because she had cleared a path the hard way. A supertanker became, for a stretch of water, a minesweeper. It was humiliating and clarifying at once. Mines were cheap. Clearance was slow. Prestige didn't float you over a pressure trigger. Lessons crystallized in hours. Mines weren't a nuisance, they were strategy. A few laid in the right place imposed patience on navies used to speed. Mine countermeasures craft was scarce. Airborne mine hunting was in its adolescence, and every all-clear felt conditional. The Convoy model held, but it needed more. Intelligence on where mines were going in, not just where they'd been found. Pressure on the networks laying them, proof that escalation wouldn't spiral out of control. Escalation still came. In 1988, after the US frigate Samuel B. Roberts struck a mine and nearly broke apart, restraint had a limit. Operation Praying Mantis hit back. US forces targeted Iranian naval units and oil platforms used for military purposes. It was a one-day lesson in naval dominance. Speed, coordination, and a clear objective: reduce the capacity to harass shipping. Iranian boats were sunk or damaged, platforms wrecked, and a message sent that mining US-escorted routes wouldn't stay a low-cost option. But even those decisive hours sat inside a narrower calculus. The US didn't want a wider war. Iran didn't want annihilation. Both sides tested the lines. Ships shadowed each other. Patrol craft flashed weapons. Radios crackled with warnings, formal and scripted, as if tone alone could keep misfires from becoming policy. Meanwhile, insurers wrote new tables. How long to clear a lane? How many escorts per convoy? What does a near-miss cost compared to a hit? The Gulf learned to price fear precisely. Micro-stories carried the weight. A bosun on a reflagged tanker started sleeping in his boots because the alarm came without mercy. A Navy sonar tech stared at a waterfall display, convincing himself that a random clutter spike wasn't a contact, then replaying it in his head for days. A Kuwaiti official fielded calls from ship owners asking if this protection extended to berths, anchorages, pilot transfers. Every mundane step suddenly a question mark. Doctrine was being written in those conversations as much as in operations orders. What nobody knew at the time was how enduring the template would be. Convoys, yes, but only after intelligence found the laying hands and platforms. Public messaging that emphasized restraint, therefore keeping insurers and diplomats in the same room. Surgical retaliation tied to specific provocations. And behind all of it, a quieter presence. Submarines riding the thermocline, collecting signals, tracking hulls, holding options nobody wanted to use. You didn't have to announce them. You just had to make planning around them prudent. Earnest will ended, but the blueprint didn't. It moved into binders and habits. How to shepherd commercial flows through narrow water under pressure. How to pair overt escorts with covert guardians. How to keep a shooting incident from becoming a shooting war. When a tanker checks in at the strait's mouth today, the voice on the radio sounds calm because the choreography has a script, written by years when calm was the rarest commodity on the water. The shadow backstop, why nuclear assets matter here. Here's where the blueprint gets quiet. The escorts and patrol planes make the headlines. The thing that steadies hands doesn't. Nuclear-powered submarines sit off stage, not to start fights, but to keep the first shot from feeling cheap. Deterrence here isn't a speech. It's a calculation that never leaves a briefing room. If you push too far, what pushes back won't miss and won't need a runway. Attack boats give that logic teeth. A fast, nuclear-powered sub can stay on station for weeks without refueling, stalk in silence, and sprint when the board shifts. She doesn't advertise, she listens. Periscope-less masts taking little sips of sky, electronic ears, sorting the coastal noise into libraries of habits. One radar that shouldn't be on, one launcher that moved at 0240, one skiff that keeps meeting a truck at the same jetty. Those are patterns a sub can watch without being watched. If a decision comes, she has reach. Heavyweight torpedoes for anything bold at sea. Cruise missiles that can peel back a coastal radar or punch a hole in a launch site, all without turning a convoy into a gunfight. Meanwhile, the boomers, ballistic missile submarines, don't sit in the strait. They don't need to. Their patrol arcs sweep the wider Indian Ocean, a survivable second strike promise that keeps maximal bets off the table. No one says that out loud in a press conference. They don't have to. Every staff officer who writes escalation scenarios starts by asking, where are the SSBNs? The answer anchors the rest. Nuclear-powered means persistence. Diesel electrics can be very quiet, but they have to come up for air in ways you can predict and watch. A nuclear boat can loiter just outside the predictable lanes, power hungry sonars when needed, and then slide away without leaving a pattern. That endurance buys time, which buys options. In the first 72 hours of a closure scare, time is the commodity everyone lacks. A sub makes the other side hesitate, because they can't be sure what it's already seen or what it's already aimed at. This doesn't happen alone. Carriers fly visible caps of air power, P-8 patrol planes comb the sea lines, Gulf partners add patrol craft and sensors. Satellites watch the roads feeding launchers. It's a layered picture. The sub's role is to knit the quiet pieces together. Covert intelligence, time-sensitive targeting, and the credible ability to conduct a precise strike if the political ceiling allows it. That interlock matters. A carrier can signal resolve overtly. A submarine tells planners privately that a quick, deniable cut is on the table. There's a rule here. Visible escorts allowed on purpose. Nuclear assets are invisible by design. You'll never see the patrol graphic that shows the attack sub sitting 3 ridgelines off the shipping lane, listening to the surf bounce on a canyon wall. You won't read the chat where an analyst tags a mobile launcher's thermal signature, and a boat already has the bearing. What reaches the public might be a convoy photo, ships in a neat line, helicopters overhead. What keeps that photo possible is a quiet veto on escalation, an unseen reminder that a successful strike on a tanker won't be the last word. Think back to the Bridgerton mine strike lesson. Prestige doesn't float you over a trigger. The nuclear backstop doesn't either. It doesn't make mines disappear, and it doesn't clear lanes. What it does is shape the behavior that lays the mines, moves the launchers, and orders the swarm. If a mine layer knows an unseen listener can track her and a precision strike can blind her support radar before dawn, she moves differently, or not at all. If a coastal battery commander knows a missile shot might be answered by a missile he'll never hear coming, he holds his fire or disperses early, which stretches his logistics and thins his effect. The human piece is simple. A tanker captain breathes easier when escorts are visible, yes. An insurer breathes easier when incidents stay rare. Both depend on choices upstream, onshore commanders deciding not to roll dice because the table is tilted against surprise. Nuclear-powered submarines tilt that table. They add survivability to deterrence. You can't preempt what you can't find, and you can't coerce what won't surface to be coerced. You won't hear a skipper tell this story. You won't get a tour when it matters. But when the strait is tense and still somehow open, there's usually a shadow just outside the frame, patient, plugged in and ready. So the shot nobody wants stays unfired. The underwater cast, SSNs, SSGNs, and the occasional boomer. Meet the players you'll never see. Start with the attack boats, the SSNs. They're the knife edge, hunter-killer, scout, and fixer. A Virginia-class slides into the theater and vanishes, not because she's motionless, but because the sea swallows her noise. Her job list reads like 3 different wars. First, the screen, pickets set far ahead of convoys, laying acoustic tripwires across likely approach lanes. If a diesel-electric creeps out from a cove, or a swarm musters behind an island, she hears the pattern change before anyone topside senses a wake. Second, covert ISR. No periscope silhouette here. Photonic masts take a sip of horizon while the sub stays deep, vacuuming up emissions. One coastal radar sweeps off rhythm. One encrypted net grows chatty near midnight. A tug that never leaves its pier suddenly fuels twice in a day. Individually, they're quirks. Together, they're a mine-laying window opening after dark. The SSN turns those quirks into coordinates. Third, battlespace shaping. She pushes UUVs, unmanned undersea vehicles, forward like scout bees, sniffing for magnetic anomalies and pressure signatures that betray mines tucked along a contour. Those drones don't clear fields yet, not the way dedicated mine hunters do, but they proof lanes fast, sketching passable corridors with enough confidence to start moving steel. Now add the bruisers, the SSGNs. They look like attack subs until you open their magazines. Inside, racks of tomahawks, enough to turn a coastal grid into a set of dark squares without moving a carrier an inch. But their punch isn't just missiles. They're motherships, dry deck shelters for special operations teams, comms hubs that stitch together quiet networks. When the plan calls for a beacon planted near a channel or eyes ashore counting trucks at a camouflaged revetment, an SSGN can put a team on a blacked-out beach and pull them back before sunrise, with the ocean erasing footprints. There's also the cameo you'll never get a photo of, the boomer in the broader theater. An SSBN won't nose into Hormuz. That isn't the job. But knowing an Ohio-class sits somewhere in the wider Indian Ocean changes how staff officers write limits on action. It doesn't clear minds. It clarifies ceilings. Platform cycle. A Lowe's Angels class, older but sharpened by upgrades, carries a library of local sounds built over decades. Harbor hums, barge engines, the throat clearing of a particular coastal radar built in the 90s. A Seawolf-class, rare and ferociously quiet, can loiter near a choke inside a choke, canyons where sound bends and betrays clumsy hunters. Virginia block boats bring flexible payload tubes and data links that turn them into underwater routers. Collect, fuse, forward. They don't work alone. Picture a lattice stretched across the approaches. Seabed arrays quietly listening, their cables disguised as geology. Temporary passive strings seeded by allies, catching the bass notes of heavy screws. UUVs surfacing for seconds to dump packets to satellites. P-8 patrol planes overhead, cued by pings that never reach public logs. The sub is the interpreter. It knows the false positives. The ferry with a misaligned prop. The seasonal trawler fleet that sounds like a swarm until you know their metronome. It also knows when a silence is wrong, like an air defense radar that should be up during a drill but stays down because its van is moving. Micro-stories tuck inside steel. A sonar tech on midwatch counts breaths between faint transients, 10, 11, 12, trying not to turn ocean static into ghosts. The navigator holds depth against a sly current hugging a ridge, because 1 meter up throws the whole sound picture off and gives away posture. A comms specialist watches a burst transmission window slide open for 6 seconds and thread a needle, data out, no chatter back. Rolls flex with pressure. When convoys are imminent, an SSN pulls forward to ambush denial, torpedo tubes ready not to hunt glory, but to make a planner ashore ask, "What's out there I can't see?" When swarms are rumored, the boat shifts to acoustic fences, spacing along likely fan-outs and queuing helicopters to drop guns and rockets on the right wakes, not every wake. When shore batteries play shoot, move, hide, the SSGN becomes a scalpel, 2 tomahawks at a radar van and a generator, not the whole grid, because the aim is to open a lane, not a war. And then there's the seabed, the quiet ally. Passive arrays buried in silt don't tweet, don't trend, and don't care about weather. They hear the drumbeat of a mine layer's winch, the odd clack of a hurriedly repaired shaft, the harmonic of a truck ferrying missile canisters to a beach that isn't supposed to host launchers. The sub fuses that with a human detail, an IRGC patrols shift, swap gone late, and draws a line to a rendezvous nobody else can see. One more piece, deception. An SSN can throw a decoy that sounds like a sub sneezing 2 miles east, pull attention off the real lane, and make a shore battery light itself by turning on a search radar at the wrong moment. An SSGN can spread launches across bearings to suggest a phantom shooter. Confusion buys minutes. Minutes let tankers cross the narrowest gut. This cast doesn't seek credit. Their success is a headline that never comes. No strike today, convoy through, premiums down a notch. They hand that headline to escorts and ministers and markets. Then they sink back into the thermocline, reset libraries, and wait for the next habit to change. The closure scenario, how a strait gets turned off. It rarely begins with a declaration. It starts with clutter. A fishing buoy appears in a lane where none should be. A tug with a tarp on deck makes 3 night runs to the same waypoint. 2 coastal radars blink off for maintenance, then come back at a slightly different bearing. Mining is the quietest trigger. A dow that looks like any other lingers where drafts run deepest, crew moving with the patience of men who know time favors them. 100 kilograms of hateful arithmetic slide over a gunnel and settle into the contour. Shoot and scoot missiles add the theater. A mobile launcher rolls from a warehouse that used to store tires. It parks behind a seawall, unfurls, pushes 1 missile into the air, and folds before dust settles. The tracking radar stayed off. The shot rode third-party cues, shore observers, passive pics, a drone that never crossed a border on paper. Then it's gone, hiding among trucks hauling cement. Swarm harassment fills gaps. Fast boats idle outside a terminal, then split. One runs a bow across a tanker's path, another shines a laser at a bridge window, a third bumps a pilot launch and films the argument. None of it closes the strait. It closes confidence. Proxy sabotage knocks out the backstage. A pipeline booster stationed in the desert coughs flame. A minor terminal's power flickers. A cable cut forces a patrol sector to go radio dark for an hour. None of it lives long in headlines, but the sum is weight. By the time a mine actually pops a hull, the first layer of closure, psychological, already sits in place. Insurers pause binding. Ports slow pilot assignments. Crews call home and ask about bonuses, then ask about life jackets. The first 24 hours taste like fog. AIS tracks jitter as captains switch off beacons and hug shallows they trust. Social feeds flood with missiles that were flares and seizures, that were warnings over loud hailers. An oil desk in Singapore stares at 3 conflicting ship positions for the same hull. A government issues a statement urging restraint, and markets hear something's wrong. Insurance underwriters move to conference calls and talk in conditional verbs. If convoys form, if minehunters appear, if we get clarity. Meanwhile, navies scramble. A carrier surges decks, escorts push out at flank, P-8s spread a web. The quiet assets were already there. The visible ones sprint to catch up with perception. By hour 48, the choke tactics settle into a rhythm. Layered minefields in the predictable lanes, light enough to deny, heavy enough to consume time. Decoy boys seeded to lure minehunters off true lines. Shore batteries shift trucks every dusk, rockets loaded in courtyards that look like construction sites. A dozen small fishing ports become logistics nodes, fuel drums stacked, tarps over crates, a mine layer's winch clacking between calls to prayer. For every real launcher, 2 are fakes, PVC pipes painted green to force strikes to spend shots. Unknown to most, the political ceiling lowers as the military tempo rises. Coalition partners agree on protecting commerce, then argue over what counts as offensive action. One capital wants strikes on any mine layer caught underway. Another insists on documentation, video, bearings, chain of custody before action. Messages go out through back channels. Stand down and lanes will open. Keep laying and expect precision cuts. Each message risks misread intent. A skirmish in a conv, warning shots, then a collision, can derail a midnight compromise. This is the moment the secret playbook leans on seeing first. Submarines and seabed arrays reconstruct the invisible, mine-laying signatures, mobile TEL routes, the timing between fuel deliveries and missile shots. That picture informs the pacing. Too fast, and you kick the political ceiling. Too slow, and premiums calcify into abstention. The balance is surgical pressure. Remove just enough eyes and fangs to open space without inviting a wider fight. Meanwhile, crews live the closure in small miseries. A tanker captain extends spacing from 8 cables to a mile, knowing it adds hours to a transit. A pilot sits on a ladder longer than his training said was safe, because the berth ahead hasn't called all fast. A tugmaster toggles between 3 radios, none bringing certainty. Market desks flick their gaze from ship trackers to satellite stills to the text of a maritime advisory. Proceed with caution reads like don't proceed. There's a reason mines anchor this story. They don't tweet when they're gone. You can't show a mine you didn't hit. Every cleared lane feels provisional until steel passes through it. That's why decoys matter to the other side. They steal your minutes. That's why deception matters to you. Make a shore battery light itself by tempting a radar to spin. Amid that duel, a rule holds. Don't let a single successful strike define the board. Keep the shipping rhythm imperfect but alive. By hour 72, patterns harden. Insurance writes temporary clauses tied to escorted convoys. Ports set windows for transits under supervision. Navies publish VHF procedures that sound dull and comforting. Call at this point, report draft, maintain course and speed. The wildness narrows into lanes again. Not peace, not even calm, just a corridor through pressure.